Gear up, because this is the Fuel Your Marketing podcast, designed to accelerate sales and grow your business. Let's welcome your host, Arti Sharma.
Hey, welcome back to the Fuel Your Marketing podcast. I'm your host, Arti, and today I have with me the seasoned marketing executive with 20 plus years of experience leading brand and communication strategy across technology, HR, and professional services sectors. And it is such a pleasure to welcome Maureen Plowman to the show. Maureen, welcome to the show.
Arti, thank you so much for having me. I've followed you for a long time, and one of the things I love about your podcasts are they're always so relevant to what's happening in the market. So I'm really thrilled to be here.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have leaders such as you to come on and share the goodness and what's happening, what's what we've all learned along these last 2 decades have been interesting. So why don't you, for our audience, I know about you, Maureen. It's such a pleasure to have you. Why don't you talk a little bit about your past experience journey so far, and let's dive in.
Sure. So would it be okay if I just spice it up a little bit and start with a confession?
Yes, of course. Go ahead.
So I have an obsession, and my obsession is really customers. I'm obsessed with customers. It is the common thread that has been throughout my entire career. I want to know what they're thinking, what they're feeling. Do they like me? What can I do better? What can the companies I represent do better? I often like to think of myself as a matchmaker. So, a matchmaker for companies and helping to bring together the right employees and customers for those organizations. And that's done through building trust, through, sparking growth, and then really building these long-term relationships that sustain that growth. As you mentioned, I have, both large and small experience. I like to say I have the startup grit with the enterprise polish. Worked for a lot of smaller organizations, helped take them public or get acquired or get funding. And so because of that, then I've also worked for some larger organizations as well. I'm a serial marketer. I've done it my entire career. I can't imagine doing anything else except, maybe sitting on the beach would be a good profession I'd like to pursue. But again, that customer piece really has just kind of been the thread throughout all of the organizations that I've been at.
Fantastic. I love that you're obsessed with customers. The customer is the hero of our stories, I think.
For
and
sure.
I think many times companies do forget that. And I love the beach analogy because I'd love to be on the beach, but I will always be a marketer even on the beach. So I probably will be working for travel and tourism and hospitality sector at that time. That would be fun. Thank you for sharing that. So, you've had such a experience unifying the brand and the demand and the guiding companies through transformational growth, as you mentioned, from taking them from a startup stage to going public, right? That's a big one. That's a big milestone that any organization can experience. And you have that unique perspective on what it takes to build the brand and truly connect the customers, especially in this AI-driven world. So talk to me a little bit about how do you define the relationship between brand and demand, and why is it so important that these functions work in tandem?
Yes, it is one of those, I would say, the most crucial relationship, besides the one you have with your customers, obviously, is your brand and demand. I think, you can send your demand team out there all day long trying to get business, but if you don't have the story down, if you don't have the attributes, what you stand for as an organization, your mission, your narrative, and you don't have that story being put out there consistently, they might get some short-term wins, but in the long run, that will fall flat. And so you really need the two of those coming together. And then, of course, as we've talked about already, the customer piece is so important because those customer relationships are just going to be your advocates, and they're going to help you attract more new customers going forward.
Yeah, I think your current customers are definitely your champions. And I find that, we are sometimes underutilizing the value. At Measure Marketing, what we do differently, I'm not trying to plug myself in. It's just that every time we onboard a customer or every time we are in a conversation with a potential customer, we want to see, can we turn them into a case study? And if they don't match that litmus test, we don't want to work with them, because if we cannot add any value to them, or I cannot have them grow with us and stay with us as a sustainable partnership that you were talking about, that trust cannot be built over the years, it's just very hard for us to keep working with them because we put our heart into it and we want to make sure that our strategies, data, and heart are all kind of unified. So what a lovely way to kind of, talk about that. But you mentioned something around the storytelling aspect of it, right?
Sure.
In your mind, what makes a brand memorable, the story memorable? Because especially now, everything is so crowded, fast-paced, especially in the B2B landscape. Thoughts there?
Right. So I think you made a really great point. You said that you are focused on bringing customers value. And I think that really is the crux of the storytelling. So, a lot of companies go to market with just talking so much about their product or what they can do about themselves. And it really is about kind of the foundation of, okay, how are we helping our customers? What problems are we solving? And that's where the story really starts. And again, making sure that the customer is that hero of the story. So you have to be relevant. And to do all of that, you have to start really by asking questions, talking to your customers, talking to your employees, really getting underneath with what's happening in the market, having them react, both customers again and employees, to messaging, to programs, et cetera, and then telling the stories that they will see themselves in. So whether you are, one of the things I think are very important in the buying journey, one is there's some studies that say trust is the number one buying decision. And another one is around how a company treats their employees. And so a lot of times customers and the market, they want to see who's behind that logo, who's behind that brand, and the real people there. So it's putting together stories of your employees that show that they are thought leaders and they will help your customers. And then for the customers, it's really, again, talking about the things that are relevant to them and the value you're providing, and showing that you understand the problems that they have. And those are, that's kind of the foundation and the basis of the story.
I love it. I speak, as you know, on my podcast, I talk to a whole lot of leaders. Many times we're talking about branding, we're talking about storytelling from inside to the out. We're not talking about stories from our employees to our customers, or talking about, creating more stories for internal audience, right? And I think that is equally important to attract the right type of talent who could create the right value. So definitely want folks who are listening to take that home to say, how do you tell stories internally and externally?
Right. Sorry,
Yeah.
and I'll just mention two ways I think to do that. One, for the employees, is things I've done in the past have been creating internal brand councils. And so you have, you pick employees across functions and across locations, and you commit to maybe 6 months, and they join a call every month all together, right? And then, you answer their questions, you get their feedback, and then as they roll off at 6 months, they're kind of that brand advocate in their area. And then you get, 10 or 12 more and do the same thing. And the customers the same way with customer advisory boards and things like that. It's really a great way to get that feedback.
100%. So when you talk about internal stories and capturing that feedback, is it feedback that talks about what we should do as a company, or how we should take our employees, support to employees, empowering them, and those kind of stories get woven in? Or you talk about success stories that teams are sharing, or is it both?
Yes, it's all of the above.
Yeah.
And I think, one great demand initiative too is taking those stories and, bringing together your customers, because they want to network and learn from each other. That's a great way to also bring prospects in. And sometimes it's not even having the customer talk about your product or your solution. It's having them talk about a topic they're passionate about, right? And then if you've built the relationship right and you've been a great partner to them, that conversation naturally goes to the solution they're using to help solve their problem. And there it's validating your entire strategy right there, where you're not having to tell the prospects, how great your product is. Someone else is doing it for you.
Yeah, it has to be authentic, organic, and I think natural.
Yes, for sure.
For those of you listening in, stay tuned, because we are doing looks like a masterclass here, which I think Maureen is dropping some really good golden nuggets from a strategy and actionable advice standpoint. So thank you, Maureen, for that. That's really good. I also think that, connecting high-level stories to measurable business impact, that's such a missed opportunity, because everyone's doing all these team videos, getting their teams on the call. How do you use, your customer stories, customer testimonials, and all of this great content that you produce, and then turn it into, how do you measure the impact on the business, right? Because brand is something so hard to measure. In your experience, how have you been able to create more measurable brand and demand together, or just brand itself?
Sure. So you might think from a demand and brand perspective, demand obviously are those short-term wins, right? They're the ones that you're using to kind of keep your lights on and to keep your board happy with your in-quarter or, short-term goals. But I think you also have to invest in the brand in the long term, like we talked about, in programs that have a longer tail. And to do that, there's definitely longer tail metrics like brand awareness, there's earned media with PR, et cetera. But I think those take a longer time to measure. The changes really happen year over year. Mm-hmm. And so I think looking at things like customer sentiment, in a past company, we looked at acts of advocacy. How many customers were actually doing advocacy, like quotes in a press release or a case study, like you mentioned. Also, customers willing to speak to prospects. So all of those things that can tie to, with attribution, the right attribution to demand programs as well. And then I think you can also do, listening posts, what I like to call listening posts, with Net Promoter Score and CSAT, looking to see, how the relationships are going in the short term, and then obviously, turning it into a more strategic yearly metric.
Love that. Net Promoter Score is such a great, and for those of you who don't know, it's a loyalty score of your client base, and it is helmed on one question only, which is, would you recommend the company to your friends and family and other colleagues, right? So that's at least what we measure at Measure Marketing. That's the one overarching question that's at the end of the year dictates the bonuses. One metric at least that dictates the bonuses for my team, because at the end of the day, we want to make sure that there is all the hard work that we're doing is received as value for our customers, and they see it. Sometimes, you think as an organization that you've added a whole lot of value, but if it doesn't mean anything to your customers, then obviously you've not done the job. So AI is playing a big role, right? And we're all talking about telling stories at scale, telling stories at speed, and there is a human avatars all over the world, right? Talk to me a little bit about your take on humanized versions of storytelling and AI bot-driven stories, and
Yes.
overall in this AI-driven world, right? What should marketers not automate?
So I think I will start with, in this new world of work, I think it's a responsibility of, leaders to make sure that their employees are enabled for the new world of work, right? So making sure that there are tools that they can use at their disposal, because it's helping them create efficiencies and, get smarter in your own organization, and it'll help their career as they go somewhere else. So I'm a huge fan of AI. But I think the human piece of it is what has to stay human. So using it for things like brainstorming and to get stories going. But I think it's those human elements, you putting in the things that you know about your customers, the examples that you know about yourself, that will truly bring that human element to it.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, humanization cannot be ignored. We're selling to humans. We have to turn.
Right.
We have to keep that, right?
And I think that's always a great point to selling to humans, because, my career has spanned, we talked about enterprises, but I've also worked for organizations whose customers were small businesses. And one of the things I always get inspiration from are those types of companies, and also B2C, because they speak to people like they're people. And I think one thing from an enterprise perspective that we really have to make sure we keep within our marketing and our demand programs is that thought that you're talking to a human, whether it is, someone at the C-suite or it's an individual user, they're still a person. And I think those are the brands that really stand out, are the ones that speak to you like you're a person. And it's that human element, making that emotional connection versus being a little bit too corporate.
Yeah. And I think, you raised a very good point. We had a client who, just a quick story here. We had a client who's, we did a complete brand overhaul for them, and they wanted to look extremely premium, but their user base was somebody, because their product was a low cost entry level product that was bulk of their revenue forecast. And because the site looked so premium and everything around their brand looked so premium, they were not getting conversions. And the moment we turned that on to make it look, to talk to people who are buying from you, and then created that emotional connection, changing some positioning around it, you won't believe it. The kind of return on marketing that we achieved for them, that was tremendous. And unfortunately, can't spell the names, but you have to understand that you cannot be premium and sell, smaller ticket item.
Yes.
You have to match that. There cannot be disjointedness. And, as marketers over the years, things have changed so much, things have evolved so much. We all have made mistakes. In your case, let's talk a little bit about the mistakes we made. What's the one mistake or two mistakes that you think you've made that actually turned into your favor rather than, against you? Or maybe a rule that you have broken that ended up working in your favor?
Sure. Well, I give you an example. A few years ago, I started with a company, and I kind of built their marketing team, and the CEO brought me in, and I, put my big task was to put together a marketing plan. And I put together what I thought was a great plan. And what he said to me was, that's great for part of our business, but you didn't also think of this other part, right? And so I think it has always been ingrained in me that you really have to understand who your users are, who your customers are. So that's kind of just something that it's always kind of sat with me, that, making sure that you're truly focused on who that customer is and who that user is. And I think the other piece, again, is just getting the feedback again. So, I am someone that is really sometimes thinking about the big strategic thing up here and not always in the details of the day to day. And I think one of the things that, I don't know if you've ever had the predictive index or any of the personality things done, right? And so one of mine is a Maverick. And so that's again, very strategic, innovator. And also part of it is that likes to convince people of their opinion. And so that always keeps me focused again on making sure the opinion is the right one, and always doing the data, having the data behind you and the feedback, and kind of going at it that way.
Such a funny thing that you said, because I was looking at my MO. We do Kobe Index, and I've done StrengthsFinder on myself. And which one is it? I'm not sure. The one that has all these different superheroes. You said Maverick is one.
Maverick, yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, so what I did was, because I'm also an visionary and an innovator in my own ways. Sometimes that's why I'm running the agency, I guess. So I learned that I have to surround myself with people who say no, and people who challenge me. Although I don't like it, but sometimes over the years I've learned that I have to be okay with it, and I have to ask them for data and prove me wrong.
Yes.
And sometimes they probably don't buy into my vision for what I'm seeing. So I have to convince them why this project needs to be pushed through and prioritized. So
Right. And I do
how,
think, I mean, that's how you get different perspectives, right? That's how you learn and you keep growing. I think another point that just came up as we were talking or just came to my mind was just that importance of, I always say to my teams, you have to have your narrative, right? And so if you do have a point of view, you have to be able to defend it, right? And so you have to use whatever you've learned around you, if it's voice of customer, if it's, the reporting from a campaign that you did or the testing, and that becomes the narrative that you are just always talking about, right? And so you have an opinion when you're in the room, you back it up with data. So people then begin to really think of you as an expert. And I've used that a lot with teams that have been made up more of early professionals to really help them gain credibility. And I think it
yeah.
goes through it should span your entire career.
Yeah, such a golden advice and a nugget there for those aspiring marketers. Have your defendable stories and ready
Right.
before you go and ask for more budget or you ask for more resources. And yeah, so I always think that you cast a vision for your project and then say, this is what it is what I need and what it'll do. Now, I know that you've had so much experience with enterprise level clients, and sometimes enterprise level clients operate at a different level than probably mid-tier organizations, and then sometimes you're always navigating changes at enterprise level, right? Mostly at enterprise level, especially when technology changes are happening, AI is coming into play. We've seen a whole lot of restructuring happening at organizations. You've led marketing through those high growth moments and through also IPOs and acquisitions. And what's the one lesson you would say that you have learned, the leadership lesson that you may have learned, which has helped you with staying consistent, through all of it?
Well, I think, my mantra that I always say is keep the employees and customers at the center always. So always, even as things are changing, keep getting the feedback, keep getting those nuggets of information from your customers and your employees, I think is the big thing. But I think also just to stay steady, right? There's a lot of change that happens every day, especially now. I mean, look at AI a year ago as compared to the use of it today, right? And so I think you have to be someone that leans into change. Things aren't going to stay the same, and being able to pivot and really look at the situation and say, okay, I'm going to lean into this and I'm going to learn something, I think is most important.
Stay obsessed with your customers.
Yes.
That's where we started, right? That's good. You did talk about a lot, like we've talked about brand and demand today a lot. And I think one of the things that we probably may have missed, and this just came to my mind, is when it comes to, storytelling, that's one aspect of it, right? You can tell stories and I'd say essentially tell stories, but are there any other ways that companies today should be investing in brand? And especially those who are tight on budget, what are some guerrilla marketing tips that you may have?
I would say find out where your customers and your prospects are and be there, right? I think we all get used to the traditional channels that we use. And especially as the world is changing, you really have to think about where are they and how do you show up consistently in those new places.
Because you said to me prior to this that, you can't expect demand if you don't invest in brand. So you have to continually build upon that. Good. And also in terms of, I'm going to go back to leadership again. I'm jumping from one thing to the other. So much of different workforces coming in, right? From, I don't know, I've forgotten Gen Z, Gen X, Gen Y, whatever the case may be.
Yeah.
We're all trying to navigate this together. There's 3 generations in work in most companies these days, right? And do you think that the audience is we're connecting to our audience the same way as we should, given the 3 different types of mode of operations exist in any organization? And how can teams do a better job of connecting with users? And what can our audience, expect in today's changing working environment?
Right. That's a great question. So I think let's start internally. I think with leading teams and having multi-generational groups, I think number one, there's something to learn from each group. It's almost like what was that movie, The Intern, with remember
Yes.
was it Robert De
Yeah.
Niro and Anne
And
Hathaway or
Hathaway.
something? They
And
each learn
Hathaway.
from
Yeah.
each other, right? And I think that's true throughout your career. And I think I've learned just as much from early professionals as hopefully that they've learned from me. And I think sometimes even doing reverse mentorship, I think is a really fantastic idea. And then as far as external, again, it is that same thing of thinking about personalization is so important now, and people expect the same consumer experience, or they expect the same consumer experience when they're dealing with a business to business relationship as well. So again, just really understanding your audience, understanding, putting your message and your demand, campaigns and programs through the litmus test, like testing a small amount of it to see how it's working before you roll it out to the whole, to the whole audience, things like that, to really get a temperature check on what's working and what isn't.
Yeah, I always say your stories must match the delivery that your teams are doing. So alignment of your teams is so critical today.
Yes.
If your teams at every level, every functional point are not aligned to that North Star metric, it just becomes very disjointed, right?
Right.
It's a little flawed.
Yeah, and that's why I do think that relationship, that the brand teams really need to speak to the demand teams on a regular basis and understand, like, here is the message, here is, and then here's how it comes down to your world. And I think the other common thread throughout all of this, whether you're talking to your employees and your customers, is just communication. Like, really, again, understanding your audience. But if you have international teams, making, understanding some of those nuances. If you have international customers, knowing that in some countries they might be a little bit more reserved, right? And you have to be careful of your message and all those things.
Yeah, over communication doesn't hurt, and giving more context doesn't hurt at all.
Right. And I'll tell you, I've run customer success for organizations as well. And I would say the biggest downfall or the biggest issue customers usually have, it's about communication. It's about someone either didn't respond in time, didn't really understand what I was saying. Like, I think those, or didn't follow up after the fact. I think you could probably wipe out, I'm just going to put a number on, like, on the wall, 80 to 80% of the issues customers have with organizations by better and stronger communication.
Yeah, proactive, not reactive. Listen.
Exactly.
The signals everywhere.
Yeah.
Just train your teams to listen and respond and empower them to respond, right? And that's what I would say.
Right. And that's how you build trust, right? That is that customer experience, whether, it starts maybe with the first touch point they have in your campaign, but it goes all the way through. It's how your salespeople talk to them, right? Or are they being, are they calling them too many times, right? It's how your support team answers the call. It's how your finance team speaks to, or your legal team speaks to a customer during the contract, right? It's kind of, it has to go through the whole organization. You really have to get it into the groundwater as a company if you want to make a difference.
Yeah, 100%. And that's why I think I'm really proud of what we've built as an agency. We have a net promoter score of 70, which is about, I'd say, much higher than most agencies globally. So
yeah.
We kept, just as we kept the customer at the center of everything. And then we also have teams and customer obsession internally. We want to make sure that we have the A+ team. We're giving them support that they need. And I think that's how small, mid, large enterprise, every organization must roll.
Right, right. And you have to have, I think, for your employees, you have to have some clear metrics on if it's net promoter, if it's CSAT, like, this is, as a company, here's what we're trying to get to, right? You're going to be measured on this, executives are measured on it as well. And I think doing it, as I said, like on a yearly basis is great, but I think depending on your business, there's also opportunities to do it throughout the year as little checkpoints, like maybe before you do your renewals, if you're a SaaS business, or, if you have a big project and that there's going to be key pressure points during that project, doing little listening posts before you get to the end and find out that maybe something didn't work as well as it was supposed to.
Listen genuinely, be care and listen. With all the experience that we've talked about, all the different subjects that we've talked about, what's your one advice to the modern leader in marketing who's trying to eye on the VP role or the CMO role or the future leader executive level role? What's the one advice that you would give to them?
I don't know if there's one. I'll tell you maybe my top 2 or 3. The top one would just be,
let's go top 3.
All right. From a marketing perspective, revenue is always the most important number. It doesn't matter what role of marketing you have. Like, you better be having an impact, showing your worth, and as much as you can tie yourself to revenue, like, that's going to be good. And then I would say the second one, of course, is employees and customers, always at the center of all your strategies. And then I think the third one is just, you have to be excited about what you do because that's when you do it the best, right? Bring that energy. We both talked about we'll always be in marketing,
On the
for
beach.
our entire life on the beach, right? You can be the travel agent. I'll mix the drinks or something on the beach, but you have to bring that excitement to work because your customers see it, your employees see it, your colleagues see it.
And I think it's so evident when you're not interested, and you're just cruising along. And I think that is not good for you, for your team, and for your company and your customers, right? At the end of the day, maybe make that seat available to somebody else if you're not interested. I always say that.
Right.
Thank you. This was so lovely, Maureen. We hit it on every front. I'm not sure if it, covered everything that we could and we want to, but I think the time is up, and we want to make sure that people who are listening in can get to what they were doing earlier prior to hopping on this segment. But again, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your insights. For anyone who's wanting to connect to Maureen, please find her on LinkedIn, and her LinkedIn is linkedin.com, and search for Maureen Plowman. You would find her. And again, Maureen, I just want to say that, your work has been tremendous. I want to wish you all the very best in all that you're doing. And thank you again to everyone who's listening in. Please follow, like, and share this segment with your network. And tell us in the comments on, YouTube, Spotify, or iTunes, what more would you like to hear? If there are any guests that you want me to bring on, I would be happy to reach out to them. Again, as we continue to grow our Fuel Your Marketing community, we are very appreciative of everyone who's listening in. So thank you very much. See you next time.
Thank you for listening to the Fuel Your Marketing podcast. For more episodes, visit www.fuelyourmarketing.ca.